And now I want to turn it back over to David because David has had a relationship with Herschel for many years, going back to the 60s, I believe. And I just want to invite you, David, to share about your relationship with Herschel and what his music and
Glad to
picking.
talk a little bit about it. Uh, I met Herschel in the early 60s. I was born in 58, and my parents were big fans of the Dixie Gentlemen and would buy all their records. And along with Monroe and other important people, they wanted me to listen to Herschel. And Herschel was mind blowing to a little impressionable kid because he didn't play mandolin like anybody else. He was super clean and precise
Mhm.
and could use his pinky to hit high notes in rapid fire. And he played mandolin kind of like a fiddle, I guess, or he could play mandolin like a guitar or a banjo. It wasn't like it didn't seem to be confined to what we expect out of a mandolin for the time. I guess you could say it was advanced, progressive, but yet it stuck.
Totally.
It was in the melody, but he could dance around the melody the way a good fiddle player could play.
Yeah.
And so grew up being taken to as many shows as I could to hear him play. And my brother and I were both huge fans of Herschel, and he was so cool. He was really good looking, still is really good looking. He wore these really nice suits, and boy, he looked great on stage. I always used to
Great
think,
sideburns.
yeah, and combed back black hair, and I always thought he looked like a bullfighter with that mandolin. He had this confidence, and he was good looking. Uh, People in the audience loved him, and then when he'd take a break, it was just like everybody went wild. And another thing is that Monroe had a lot of respect for Herschel. And when I was a kid, I talked to Monroe a lot, and unlike a lot of other people, I was always asking Monroe what he thought of this person or that person. Like I'd ask, like when Jimi Hendrix was big in the late '60s, I would ask Monroe, "What do you think of Jimi Hendrix?" Or, what do you think of Chuck Berry? Or what do you think of B.B. King? Or what do you think of the Beatles? Or what do you think of, like when Tony Rice came out in the '70s? What do you think of that Tony Rice guy on the guitar?
Yeah.
And well, of course, Herschel was one of the people that I asked Monroe, what do you think of that guy?
Mhm.
And Monroe had this amazing high level of respect for him. And he told me several times, he said, if he were a fiddle player, I'd hire him because he plays mandolin just like the fiddle playing that I like.
Mhm.
And he said, I bet you he does play fiddle. And I said, I don't think Herschel plays fiddle, but I don't know. And he said he couldn't play mandolin like that if he couldn't play the fiddle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
anyway,
precise.
Monroe always had high praises and kind of an equal amount of respect for Herschel, as an equal, I guess you could say, as far as creating his own style.
Yeah. Big
And,
deal.
and, and I guess without any further ado, I have a little surprise. I decided to come down to Herschel and Joyce's house. So that's where I am right now. And Herschel's sitting right next to me.
Hey, now that's a good surprise.
So, Herschel,
Roanoke.
come on over.
Welcome, Herschel. This is such a big treat for us. So good to see you, man. How are
Well,
you?
do you?
Scoot on over.
Oh,
I
it's
see
great to
your
see you.
dad. I see your dad from time to time, but I haven't seen you but a very few times. But I sure like that Monroe playing you do.
I appreciate that a whole lot. It was such a treat to get to visit with you at Randy's that last time. And
Right.
I know that you told one of the best Monroe stories I'd ever heard about that seafood restaurant down in New Orleans. Maybe we can touch on that at some point. But just want to say welcome and thank you so much for wanting to be a part of this workshop here today. Thank you.
Thank you and David very much for asking me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So yeah, what was your relationship with Bill like? Did you know him from early on, like seeing him at shows and stuff like that? And were you ever studying his music before you started working on creating your own style, which has been just so influential and bluegrass? And just to tack another little question on there, did you feel like, and you might have not even thought about it when you're just coming up with the flow with your music, did you feel like it was progressive at the time, or did you feel like it was just kind of like, carrying on from the tradition that was around you?
Well, to be honest, Chris, I didn't think a lot about um, the tradition, even though I respected it highly.
Mm-hmm.
I had two respects for Monroe. One as a great creator and musician, and then the other as a man.
Yeah.
Uh, I got to know him quite well, and I learned early on he didn't like a weak person. He really didn't. He didn't like a person that wouldn't work
Uh-huh.
because he'd always worked hard all his life.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a big family like he did and had to work, We just, it was a natural thing. And we talk about our upbringing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And from early on, he heard me playing, and he told me one night at the opera, I'd go up there and hang out with him.
Mm.
And he told me then that he really liked what I'd done.
That's so
Uh,
cool.
he said because you're not even any ways close to what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
but what you're doing is dead on.
Mm.
I said, well, I don't know about that. I just play what I hear. He said, don't ever quit doing that.
That's so encouraging to hear from, Bill Monroe himself. In a way, I was thinking about this earlier today, that, to me, the last lesson of Monroe's style, like for the people that are really, studying it, for instance, like Frank Wakefield was, get your own style. It's like, study all the good stuff and then do it your own way. And you were ahead of the curve there.
Well, there was a reason for it, though. And I told Monroe, um, I couldn't get in his head, his approach to the tens. He used to visit me quite a bit when I moved to Virginia. It was a stop off. He would come by, and my wife would cook for me and him, and we'd sit on the couch while she's cooking and pick and talk.
Mm.
And he asked me why I didn't early on uh, play like him or go after his style.
What a
And
moment there. What a question.
I just told him, I said, well, to be honest, I could not grasp your approach to a tune. And you know how Monroe was, a man of very few words
Yeah.
sometimes, and he said, that's a good thing. Just to him,
Yeah.
it was almost like he was saying that's the way it should have been.
Yeah, that is so profoundly interesting. And yeah, so what was, what was it like getting to know Bill and getting to pick with him, at the house and casual situations, all that kind of thing?
Well, I had seen him the first time when I was 7 years old,
Wow.
and I'd been playing, fooling with the mandolin a year. I started when I was six, and of course that was, as you know, the date was 42, and that was early on. String bean and uh,
Mm-hmm.
oh gracious, a guitar player, and I can't think. Quiet Moody.
With Clapton, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then I seen him after Lester came to the band, and String Bean was still in the band. And I seen him when I was a kid growing up like that. And just, I loved the music so much. Things like Summertime's Past and Gone and
Yeah.
all that older stuff that Flat cut with him. Man, I was into that up to my eyes, loving it. But the first time I ever met him, I'll tell you this, and I'll try to condense it. But there's a funny little story come out of it. I didn't know that he was having problems with one of the band members, and I won't say who she was. But anyway,
Oh.
he, I walked up and I said, Mr. Monroe, I'm Herschel Sizemore. I said, I'm learning to play the mandolin, and I said, it's coming along pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
He turned around and he said, I guess you're copying me. And when I was young, I was real hot-headed, which is a terrible flaw in a person's character. But, before I even thought, I said, no, I never tried to copy you and never will. And I just turned and walked off. And I glanced back, and he was standing there looking at me. He couldn't figure it out why I would walk off, I guess.
Yeah, he said, well, that
I
never happened before.
I was just mad. I was just wanting to get to know him,
That's
tell
funny.
him I'd been seeing him and all that. Well, to make a long story short, the next time I seen him in person, my wife and I were over at Warrior River,
Hmm.
uh, Alabama. There's a park over there. Monroe's playing. We went over there, and I was standing way away from the stage. Didn't think anybody seen me. And Monroe stepped up to the mic in between teams, and he said, "A good friend of mine's here today." And he said, "I'm going to get him up." And he said, "You folks are in for a treat." He said, "This boy can play
Oh, wow.
mandolin." And he said, "Come on up here, Herschel." And I didn't figure my name meant any more to him than John Brown.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
he remembered my name. And
Wow.
so he kept on, and I said, "I don't even have a mandolin." He said, "I do." And he handed me his mandolin, wrapped the strap up, where it was short enough for me. Hand me his mandolin. I didn't have no choice. He said, "Now play rawhide." And I had to
Whoa.
play rawhide in front of probably 3,000 people
Oh my gosh.
on his mandolin. When I walked up to the mic, I knew Kenny Baker already. Kenny Baker said, "Cut it, son."
Woo.
So I just did the best I could. And when Monroe come back up, just in his own style, he said, "I told you he could do it." He was
Wow.
that confident that I could get through it. Either that or else he was hoping I wouldn't. I don't know.
Oh
But
my
that
gosh, what a
was
moment.
my first encounter on stage.
Wow. That is so what a surprise and way to rise to the moment and and come through there. What did that feel like when you got done playing?
Well, of course, I was a young guy, and people really applauded for me. I guess they felt sorry for me, being a young kid up there beside Monroe trying to play his tune on his mandolin.
Do you remember
But
about what year that would have been?
mm, probably 53,
Wow.
53, I would
Wow.
say, 52 or 3.
Yeah.
And from then on, we really became good friends. And
Wow.
I even booked shows for him when rock and roll started.
Uh-huh.
I booked some shows down through Alabama. He was really having a hard time.
Yeah.
And he asked me when could I book some shows. I said, sure. He said, I really need it. And so I booked some shows down there in my band, and he, Bessie Lee, and Joe Stewart came down.
Hmm.
And he and I sang two or three duets. We sang some trios.
Wow.
And first time I ever thought about singing lead with Bill Monroe, but I guess he felt like I would try anything he asked me to. But over the years, we just became closer and closer.
Wow. And one of those times that you booked a show for him, y'all ended up was it down in New Orleans?
No, it was in Florence, Alabama. Uh,
Florence.
I booked the show over in Southwest Tennessee at Walnut Grove, Tennessee. And after the show, we just had a huge crowd. And he was real pleased with the show and the crowd and everything. He said, "I'm going to take you boys to a restaurant and buy you a seafood dinner." So we go over to this restaurant, and it was a Howard Johnson's there on Florence Boulevard. The only thing open back at that time in Florence, Alabama, after about 8:30 at night, everything folded up.
Hmm.
So we go in and he orders a seafood dinner for everybody and coffee.
Uh-huh.
Well, they brought us lukewarm coffee, never came back, warmed the coffee up, cooked the seafood till it was just a pale, real pale. It wasn't even buckskin color,
Mm.
just real pale beige. Brought it out. Well, we picked around over it, and anyway, got up and went up to the cash register, and nothing to do him but to pay for it.
Hmm.
And this young guy behind the cash register, I guess, thought I'm going to straighten this old man out for bringing this bunch in here late. And he said, "How was the service?" Bill was looking off up at the ceiling like he was out hunting rabbits or some kind of coon or something. And he said, "The worst I've ever had." And the guy just on had, the guy came back at him. He was going to put him in his place. He said, "Well, we were closing when you came in here." Monroe never even made eye contact with him. He's still looking off up at the ceiling. He said, "You should have closed before we got here." And the guy just wilted like a flower. Poured hot water on.
That is one of my favorite stories. You should have closed before we got here. That is so
Yeah.
funny.
He said, "We were closing when you came in. Well, you should have closed before we got here."
That is so great. Herschel, just like so many folks, probably anybody that's probably heard your tune, Rebecca, that just opened up. It opened up the key of B, and it opened up. It's almost like the one tune. It's so interesting how big tunes like that can like almost create their whole like create a whole subgenre, and so much music came from Rebecca, and it's taught so many people how to play in B and all that kind of stuff. I want to say two things. Thank you for writing that tune. Just amazing. And I was wondering if you might talk just a little bit about how you came to write it, and just like your approach to creativity within bluegrass, and and then also maybe share with some folks kind of just your whole process, because we have some folks here. Everybody here has been writing tunes a little bit, but of course we want to be able to develop the skill the best we can, and learn from folks like yourself. I mean, to write a tune in the key of B, that was a really rare and remarkable thing to happen, especially to write one so good that has just withstood all the ages and is as fresh today as it was when you wrote it. Would you talk a little bit about those things?
Well, the way it came about, I was supposed to do a long play album for Dave Freeman,
Hmm.
and he wanted me to bring in some new material, and I told him I would. And back at that time, I was young. I didn't settle down and discipline myself to write like I should, and the time was getting real close. And one day, my wife was working. She worked for the county school board, and I was sitting in the corner of our living room, and I was just doodling around on the mandolin, and just all of a sudden I heard this tune, and I just started following what I could hear,
Hmm.
and in about 15 minutes I had that tune.
Wow.
Only little hang up I had, and I'm sure you know where I'm talking about, is where there's a holdover and there's a little half cross picking lick there. I couldn't figure out anything. The rest of it just came to me,
Hmm.
and I just started playing it. But when I got to that, it was a long strum.
Hmm.
So I didn't want to just do that. So I incorporated that into it, and it just fit like a glove. When you came out of it, on the third string, you just slid right back down and you was into it again.
Yeah.
And that's the way it came about.
Wow.
That
Is
I
that
put it in.
is that little part at the end of the A part was like doodle 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 doom doodle doodle kind of at the end of the A
Yeah,
part.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
gotcha.
Well, in the middle, there is a holdover, and at the end, that of course that ends the that time through,
Yeah,
and yeah, that's the thing. Kind of like that.
yeah, cool syncopated roll there. And just for the record, is there or is there not a stop on the five chord, the end chord?
There is no stop.
There's no stop. He wrote it. There's no stop.
I heard that debated in Alberta one night. I was playing with the Bluegrass Cardinals, and Don Parmley and myself walked up to a jam around this big bonfire, and this young guy was playing, and two or three of the guys were going all the way through, and two or three were stopping. And he stopped. He said, "Somebody's missing the stop here." And the guy standing with the guitar across from him was looking directly at me. Evidently, the man had recognized me when we walked up.
Hmm.
And he said, "There's no stop in that." He said, "I bet you there's a stop in it. It has to be. When he comes up to that part, it has to be." He said, "Well, the man that wrote it's standing right behind you." And I felt so bad for that young guy. He turned around and turned every color
Oh.
and apologized for his inept way of playing it. And I said, "Look, man, if you like my tune well enough to play it, you'll get better at it." I said, "There's nothing wrong with the way you're playing it now, but the more you play it, it's just like myself or anybody else. The
And
more you play it, the better you'll get."
I actually played it with the existing Rebecca in strum machine, and they put the stop in there.
No,
So who's right, you or strum machine?
Machine body.
Well, they corrected your mistake.
Yeah, yeah.
well, David,
But
yeah, go ahead, Herschel. Excuse me.
I was just going to say, that was one time when it was a bunch of jammers there, and it once it was settled, it pleased everybody. They knew one way or the other, but there was no stopping it.
Oh my gosh, Diane, one of the folks in the workshop here, she's out in Montana. She just said that Rebecca is her ringtone on her cell phone. So when her cell phone rings, you got Rebecca playing on it. That is just so wild. That is the digital age in bluegrass in the best way. David,
Well, bless.
yeah, that's so cool. Uh,
And Herschel knows that when I got that record, I played that tune, at least 10,000 times. And everything else on that record, that Bounce Away record, I was just as obsessed with Herschel as I was with, Monroe and all the others, Frank Wakefield and David Grisman and Doyle Lawson. I was taking everything he did, and I played Rebecca 10,000 times, and I still haven't figured it out completely.
well, that last one you posted on online of Rebecca, that was a beautiful arrangement. There's a little bit of bounce away. I'm just gonna, as I'm playing this, I'm gonna copy it into the chat here. This is Herschel's great album, and you can just listen to that. That is just so clean and precise, beautiful timing, tone, essence, spirit, everything. So I definitely want to recommend to everybody to get that album and check it out. When David was driving down, yes, sorry.
You're too kind.
Oh man, you're too good. If you weren't too good, I wouldn't have to be too kind. Well, I try to be kind anyway. But that is just such an epic style that you created that has been so influential. When you talk about uh, you know legendary, influential mandolin pickers, you've got to have Herschel Sizemore in there because this revolutionary way of playing so precise and so technically proficient, interpreting all kinds of fiddle tune melodies, but being able to play so precisely, so cleanly. you know Not everybody you know is is a Monroe freak, and that's just the bottom line. A lot of people, think that it's too messy, or this or that, and then so you got Herschel on the other end of the spectrum, who's like, okay, well, you can be a virtuoso in this whole other way, and it's just brought so many people into the fold, I believe, and has just had such a huge impact on keeping the genre alive and bringing more people into it who wouldn't necessarily be interested in the more kind of rough-hewn primitive sophistication of Bill. It's a completely different thing. So thank you for just just being open to that, and thanking the universe for that coming through you. When David was coming down here, we were talking on the phone a little bit. I know that he has some things that he'd probably like to ask you there that would be good for us all to be thinking about. David, anything you want to kind of get Herschel to talk about so we can share it with everybody here?
I'll tell you one thing that would be good. First of all, why don't you tell them the story real quick? I know you've said this and it's been in magazine articles, but tell them how you came up with the name Rebecca. That's a really good story.
Oh yeah.
Well, when I wrote the tune that day, it was really an odd thing that happened. My wife came home from work, and I said, "What do you think about this tune?" And I played it for her, and she said, "That is definitely different." But she said, "I think it's good." She said, "You've never written a tune for your mom, and she played guitar and
Hmm.
influenced you when you was a kid. Why don't you name that tune Rebecca?" Well, I
Okay.
had already decided that's what I was going to do. And
Wow.
so I sent it. Do you remember Tom McKinney, banjo player from
Yeah.
Nashville?
Yeah.
Tom was playing banjo with me at that time, and I sent him a tape of the things I was going to record,
Hmm.
and I didn't put any names on it.
Hmm.
And he called me, and he was just jumping up and down because Tom would get excited about things.
Uh-huh.
Really, he said, "I really like that tune that you played in B there."
Hmm.
He said, "I don't know what you're going to name it." I said, "Well, I've kind of got a tentative name, but what do you think I ought to name it?" And he'd been down home and met my mom and all. He said, "Man, if there ever was a tune for a lady, that tune right there deserves to be called Rebecca." I said,
Wow.
"That's three people that had the same idea about it, so evidently it must have been destined to be Rebecca."
Totally. That's so beautiful. When the universe wants something to happen, we can get signs from all sides. I appreciate you sharing that. That is so cool. And I guess I didn't know that your mom was a musician also. Did she play guitar and sang?
Well, she played guitar and sang, but my mom was born in 1893. My dad was born in 1887. So they were middle-aged people. My mom was 43 when I was born. She
Wow.
used to sit around the fire at night and play guitar for all of us kids,
Wow.
around the fireplace. But of course, I never seen my mom play out anywhere. But people in Southwest Virginia told me that when she was from 16 to 25, those years, she said they said she was the best guitar player in Southwest Tennessee.
Wow. Amazing. Are there any recordings of her?
No,
Oh
sadly,
wow.
there's not.
Do you have
Yeah.
any pictures of your mom with the guitar?
No,
Do you have the guitar?
no. She never had an expensive guitar, good guitar. Um, Her mom and dad both died, and she was raised up. Her dad at 2 years old, and her mom at 12.
Wow.
And she was raised up by her siblings,
Hmm.
and she didn't, they, I guess, didn't see the need to go out and buy, an expensive, back in that day even, an
Yeah.
expensive instrument, but she deserved one.
Yeah. Mary was just asking what songs she liked to play and sing.
Well, it was a very ironic thing. She played, honestly, between the style of Mother Maybelle, excuse me, and uh, oh girl, Merle Travis.
Wow.
She played that style where she beat out the rhythm with her thumb and
Yeah.
played with her two fingers.
Wow.
And one of her favorite tunes, and it's really not for the faint of heart, was Spanish Fandango.
Interesting.
And, I don't know where a country kid that had never been anywhere until she grew up and got older even heard the tune.
Yeah. Wow. Well, she must have
She,
had the ear for the good material like yourself.
well, she she was always dedicated to anything she did.
Hmm.
You know, she carried it through, and she taught me that. She said, "Don't start something if you're not going to finish it."
Hmm.
And I was determined when I was trying to learn to play, and I'm still trying, but I was determined to learn to play good and clean.
Hmm.
Do you remember one of the older guys of this business is passed on now, Carl Sauceman?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
The Sauceman brothers, JP and Carl.
Yeah.
I knew them, and I went and tried out with Flat and Scruggs and turned them down because they were just traveling too much for
Wow.
me.
No kidding.
Well, I took the job, was going to take the job with Carl, and I went down and tried out and everything. And of course, he was paying everything he could, but the money wasn't there.
Hmm.
And while we were there, we did a Sunday afternoon radio broadcast and did a lot of gospel quartets and stuff.
Hmm.
The phones just rang off the hook. When we got off, I thought I'd done pretty good. And uh, Carl said, your only flaw, and I thought, oh God, he don't like what I'm doing. He said, you're playing too clean.
Huh.
And I did. I mean, but I didn't have a lot of volume. He said, loosen up. If there's a little rough edge to it, that will sell.
Wow. Interesting. And did you kind of incorporate that in your approach a bit?
Absolutely did.
Yeah.
That's when I let my hand really go freer, and I didn't worry about every little thing like I did before, just trying to make it perfect.
Yeah.
I just played what I felt.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear, with all the folks that are learning here, um, what were some of your most challenging growth edges and some of the things that you did to overcome them?
Excuse me. Well, one thing, um, most people, I guess, would have gave up. When I first started playing out at the high schools and um, stage shows at schools and things like that, you just played like the rest of everybody, Flat Scruggs, Monroe, everybody did. You just played anywhere you could.
Hmm.
And people had walk up to me, and a lot of people wouldn't tell this, but it's part of the story. They'd say, "You're not playing right, son," and I would say, "Well, I'm playing the best I can. What do you think's wrong?" They'd say, "You're not playing like Monroe,"
Oh.
and I mean, right to my face. And I said, "Well, I can't. I can't play like him. I'm playing exactly what I hear and feel." And I told that story till I was blue in the face, and then finally people started coming around. It started catching on,
Hmm.
and
I think it's because you were just ahead of your time, and people thought it was too progressive because it was clean, and you were playing all these individual notes.
yeah, it was. In essence, it was totally different to Monroe's approach
Hmm.
because he would he did his right hand.
Hmm.
I had a blessed with a pretty good right hand,
I'd say.
but he would whip that man to death with that right hand, and he didn't have to do a bunch of notes.
Uh-huh.
But I could hear all these fill notes.
Yeah.
I could hear all that as well as the melody.
Hmm.
And so, I just had to do what I could hear.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Told me a lot of times, he said, I like what you do. He said, I said, you don't think I'm getting too progressive? He said, no, when you stay on that melody like that. And
Right.
so, I appreciated that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Monroe
So,
himself was a very progressive,
oh gosh, yeah.
radically progressive. When you think of that crazy stuff he was doing in the '50s.
Revolutionary. Absolutely. So when you were getting more proficient, what do you feel like were some of the things that help you the most to get clean and to develop your technique? Was it learning, like the real distinct, like every like kind of fiddle note in all the old fiddle tunes, or what was it that helped you kind of get to that pinnacle of technical ability?
Well, I drew from all kinds of things. There was a radio show that played black music
Hmm.
in the afternoon over in Florence, Alabama.
Hmm.
And the name of the radio show was Bill Street Jive.
Hmm.
And I would listen to that, and I'd hear B.B. King and Muddy Water, all these blues players.
Hmm.
Well, there was a blues player in the little old town where I grew up, and he'd play the bottle with his middle finger, a bottleneck,
Hmm.
play the old cheap guitar,
Hmm.
and he could get more out of that thing than you would ever dream of.
Wow.
And I would sit and listen to him. I listened to Tommy Dorsey. I listened to Pete Fountain. I listened to anybody that played good.
Yeah.
And I guess a little of all of it rubbed off on me, the blues and, a little jazz, this and that. I like to hear Al Hurt play the trumpet.
Yeah.
Fountain, I like to hear him play the clarinet.
Yeah. Yeah. Just having that open mind. You can't just turn your back or turn your ear on so much good stuff that's out there. So if you were gonna like give any advice about how to work within an ensemble, because that's one of my favorite things about your music is how well it supports the ensemble, how tasteful it is. What are some of the key things you feel like are the most important when it comes to existing within a band and like bringing the most out of your mandolin music and finding that role within different ensembles?
Well, I guess different people have different ideas of how to do it, but I always listened to what was going on around me, and I tried, and I didn't always succeed, but I tried to do something that would be complementary to whoever I was playing with and around.
Hmm.
And I didn't, some of the little quickie, some people would say hot licks or this or that. I didn't sit down and worry about that.
Hmm.
Uh, Most of the things that I did like that, believe it or not, I would hear that when I'd be recording in the studio. Most of the time, the things you heard me do that was a little bit far out, it was instantaneous. I did it in the studio. Just
Uh-huh.
hear it and go for it.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
didn't dwell on, well, I want to go out there and just blow them away.
Yeah.
I wanted to fit in the band.
Yeah.
And I tell you where that came from was Flat and Scruggs.
Mm.
Uh, and Monroe's fiddle players and how they worked around his mandolin playing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you didn't go out there just on a self mission. You went as a support group, the
Mm-hmm.
way I looked at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to make the ensemble be good and not,
Hey,
yeah, not,
Herschel,
Yes,
would you mind maybe playing a little tune for the folks?
yes, please.
I'll
Great
try.
idea. Thank you.
I don't play a lot anymore, and I don't. I won't have to tell you. You can tell that, but I'll try.
Beautiful. Well, this has been such a special thing to get to visit with you. And of course, Herschel's, you know, he's always known to have an excellent mandolin, one of the best mandolins ever. What's the story on that particular mandolin?
Well, Doug Crouch out in St. Louis owned this mandolin, and of course he played banjo and guitar, and he just let people play it that played in his band. And Tom McKinney was out there and seen the mandolin and heard it played. And while he was there, Monroe came by. He knew Dub, invested with him, and he heard Monroe play it.
Mm.
And Dub run it in Bluegrass and Limit
Mm.
for sale. He ran it in there for sale.
Yeah.
And Tom called me, said, "You got to get that mandolin."
Ah,
And so I called up and wound up buying it from him.
wow.
He had a 25 or 6 Fern that was absolutely like it was made yesterday,
Wow.
but it sounded that way.
Uh-huh.
And I took this old girl and went out under a big tree, sat there on a bench, and I played it for 2 hours. Nobody out there but me.
Uh-huh.
And I went back and told him, I said, I want it.
Yeah.
And, that was a story within itself. He wanted 8,500 for it.
Whew. Yeah.
I said, I can't do that. I've been approved at the bank for 8,000.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have 1,000, but my banker he's gonna take care of me on it. He said, I can't do that. And he took the mandolin and put it in the case and took
Oh.
it. In
Oh.
the,
Ouch.
he was in a yellow Lincoln Continental coupe. And he tucked it back in the back of the car, and my heart fell.
Oh.
And he was backing out of the driveway, and his wife said, "Dub," I was walking alongside the car, just talking to him. His wife said, "Dub, let him have that mandolin."
Oh,
He
good.
said, "He plays beautifully. You can't even play it. You gave $1,500 for it. What do you want to do? Make a fortune off of one?"
Wow. Well,
And
thank you,
man,
Dub's wife.
I told that lady, I said, I need to come around and hug your neck.
Oh, what a great moment.
Anyway, I've had it since '82.
Wow. Well, I would love to hear it. Thank you for picking it.
This is a tune that I wrote going into Tacoma, Washington, when I was with the Bluegrass Cardinals.
Cool.
I'd started somewhere between, I don't know, Medford, Oregon on up, working on this tune. And it didn't just all come to me at once. I just kept playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's called Tacoma.
That is so good. Oh my gosh, that timing and the feel. That is so cool. I love the phrasing on that number.
See,
That
he's
is
the coolest guy on the planet.
the coolest. That is so.
He's having the effect on me now that he had back like in 1964.
It is magnetic what you're doing with that mandolin and that phrasing. That is so cool. Tacoma. Thank you for sharing that, Herschel. My goodness.
You know, Chris, I never could quite understand why that tune didn't catch on because personally, and that was just my thinking, I thought that was one of the better tunes I ever wrote.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally hard to know because I mean that's that's an awesome tune. Josh has a question here. I know we got to kind of wrap up and then get into the second hour, but we're going to get Josh in here real quick. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. So, hey, thanks for coming, Herschel. It's really cool to hear you talk and your stories. And yeah,
You,
yeah, Rebecca is such a cool song, and it's just really cool. And your other playing is great too. And so it's just an honor to get to hear from you. But I wanted to show you this. I pulled this off out of the cabinet.
Nice.
Yeah, I got that one, which I'm pretty uh, excited about. And then I just wanted to tell you a quick story. I don't know if you're familiar with Billy Strings. He's kind of, a young hotshot flat picking guitar player.
I haven't
Um,
met him, but I know who he is.
oh, well, I was at a jam with him at a festival a few years, and it was late, and it was just a big jam, and they were picking, and somebody called Rebecca and just kicked it off blazing fast. And I was sitting next to Billy, and he turned to me and he said, I don't know this one. I just can't. I just for some reason I just can't figure it out. So maybe he needs to give you a call and get a lesson or something on Rebecca from you.
I
But
just, mm,
he ended up passing on. He didn't take a break, and I took a break. I didn't. I knew it well enough to butcher a break, but I just thought that was funny.
sometimes people, just as a footnote, sometimes people will kill you by playing it too fast.
Yeah.
It is actually just a mid fast tune.
Hmm.
It's not slow, but it's not a runaway breakdown either.
Hmm.
It's slower than most people think it should be.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, I don't know if they were trying to play real fast because he was there and they wanted to impress him or what was going on. But I thought it was mature of him to be like, I don't know it well enough to play it, so I'm going to pass.
well,
Yeah.
it's just the way the tune bounces along. It gives you the impression that it's absolutely just flying,
Hmm.
but it's not. If you
True.
play as fast, really, as you first listen to it and think it is, it's so fast you don't have the note separation,
Hmm.
and time to get the little pull offs and pushes and backward slides and stuff that you want to do.
Yeah. Well, Herschel, we're going to head into our student hour here, and we've been working on Get Up John and Toy Heart, and would definitely, love it if you wanted to hang out. Don't have to, of course. But before we do, are there just a couple things that you might recommend for all of us here as we're working on our music and learning to play the mandolin that you feel like would be most beneficial?
Well, like I've told students all across the country, I'm no authority on anything, never claimed to be. I can kind of tell you the guidelines that I tried to keep in my music. And I appreciate everybody that ever liked what I done. I really do. I think listening to a tune, if you're listening to somebody else's music, listen to that tune until you can hear it in your head. Then when you start playing it, just don't try to play it too fast. Try to play the notes and separate the notes like the author of the thing did as best you can.
Mm.
And, you know, just play good timing with what you're doing. Then once you really learn the tune, then add your thing to it, what you feel, if you want to do that. But I think good timing, good taste, good tone, and good separation of the notes. I think that's where it's at.
I love that. I was just putting those in the
It'll
chat
take
notes.
concentration, as you know, because you and David both do a good job of that.
Well, I feel like I could always gain on it a little bit, and I just love that, mentioning the note separation, not going too fast, and yeah, I got to remind myself to slow down a lot because it's not a sprint that we're after. We got to enjoy the notes as they're going by. So thank you for sharing everything, Herschel. It's really a pleasure to visit with you, and thanks for making this time.
I
And
certainly appreciate it, Chris.
it's just so such an honor, and hope to get to visit with you in analog, maybe down at Randy's again, or come through Virginia sometime.
You know, I'm going to sit back and listen to your students now. I'm going to hear that.